Welcome to the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. And I'm your host, David Riddle. Okay, we're going to get right into it today. As you can see on the screen, first thing you see when you start the video is statistics, a huge Excel spreadsheet right on the screen. So, I'm sure your first question is, okay, Dave, what exactly am I looking at? Well, let me tell you what you're looking at. What we're looking at here is the 2025 USPSA participation numbers total. This is where when you guys see my Instagram posts or you listen to a podcast of me talking about statistics, this is where I'm drawing my numbers from. This is the spreadsheet that I have showing all the different level 2 matches that are in the or on the USPSA website in the calendar section for matches. Hold on, I've got to pause for just a second. I've got to cough. Actually, I needed to clear my throat, not cough. But anyway, I digress. So, this is the spreadsheet that I come up with. I changed the format around this year so that I could have everything to me more plainly visible. So, there are a lot of numbers, but it's simplified. So, what we're going to start with, though, on the left side of your screen is January 1 to June 30th. The reason I broke it down like this, and then the other half of the screen being July 1 to December 31st, is because of CO Nationals. CO still being the biggest division by far. Once you hold nationals at the end of June, well, some people who like to shoot multiple nationals are now going to be shooting major matches in different divisions. They're not going to be shooting CO. They might shoot LO. They might shoot open. They might shoot pick one. I mean, Christian Seiler is a prime example. You know, as soon as CO Nats is over, boom, he's doing open. So Mason and Nils might have shot some CO going into CO Nats, but then knowing the world shoot's coming, they're immediately switching back over to production to get ready for standard at or a production standard is limited. I'm sorry, production at the world shoot. So there were a lot of odd factors going on this year that would affect numbers. So I feel like we need to wait until next year to really see how everything shakes out between LO and CO. But then you run into there's always going to be a little widget, and that little widget is going to be the world shoot. Because starting next year, they'll start doing qualification matches for World Shoot 2029, which I was actually surprised to see 2029. I thought they were switching to a 3-year format, but 2029 doesn't math with 3 years. That's 4 years. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. I'm sure somebody will let me know what the deal is when they listen to this, but a little odd to me. Oh well, it is what it is. Left side of the spreadsheet, as you see on the screen before you, starts with the Florida State match and ends with the Wisconsin section because after that was CO Nats. So that gives us 26 matches. Yeah, 26 matches total for 6,748 participants. Some of those can be doubles. That doesn't necessarily mean there were 6,748 different people that shot those matches. I'm sure there are doubles in there. So, because I'm sure there are multiple people that shot Delmarva and the Mid Atlantic section because they're very close together geographically. So if you look at those numbers, let me move the cursor over here. For the first half of the year, CO was at 38.83%. So we'll call it 39%. Limited optics ended up at 26.82. So we're going to call it 27. 15% for open, 10% for PCC, which is actually 962. We're rounding up. Limited 4%. We're rounding up from 359. Production 3%, rounding down. Single stack 2%, rounding up. Revolver 0%, rounding down. Limited 10 1%, rounding up. Okay, those are the numbers. Now I did do a couple of interesting things here. I decided to put a bold box around the match with the highest number of participants for a certain division for that time frame. So, January 1 to June 30th, Area 1 had the largest number of carry optics providers at 182. Now, it's an area match. What to me was pretty surprising was Delmarva, which is a sectional, and I don't even know how many people, from around the country. This is most of these people are just East Coast folks or Mid Atlantic folks, really, shooting this match. There were 447 participants, six more than Area 1, and there were 176 carry optics participants. There were 135 limited optics participants. So that match was pretty darn big. So kudos to those guys. They even had the highest number of revolver shooters, tied with the Florida State match, for the first half of the year. And the Mid Atlantic had second amount with 5. So I know we're saying 6 and 5 participants, but when you're talking revolver and you're talking 0.49% of all major match participants, but that's a big percentage of those numbers. So those two matches alone had 11 out of 33. So 33% of all the participation in the first half of the year for revolver shooters, Delmarva and Mid Atlantic. So, yes, Russell, that's Area 8. Okay. Open, the Mid Atlantic section had the most number of open shooters. The South Carolina section had the largest number of PCC. Florida State had the largest number of limited at 18. And South Carolina section had 59 PCC. I don't know if I said that. The Staten Island section had the largest number of production shooters at 16. For single stack, we're going back to Area 1. So Area 1 also has 2 of the largest divisions at a single match. They had 12 single stack participants. Going back to the Florida State match, as I said, and Delmarva, they both tied for revolver at 6. And limited 10, the Staten Island section had 9 limited 10 participants. So those are the numbers for the first half of the year. I am going to scroll down a little bit because my face and my circle are kind of hiding something there. We'll get down to those numbers below later. We'll come back to those. But if you look down below the percentages, you see 5 biggest matches and 5 smallest matches. So the 5 biggest matches were the Delmarva at 447 participants. Mid-Atlantic section, 445 participants. Area 1 had 441. Florida State had 404. And the South Carolina section comes in a distant 5th at 336. So still good number. But those other 4 are all over 400 participants. So definitely, if they're not on your list, you may want to add them because clearly the Delmarva and Mid-Atlantic are doing something right to be attracting that many people to a level 2 match. So your smallest matches were the Wyoming section at 89. And look, I think this is just because they're so geographically isolated, okay? Nobody from the Mid-Atlantic region is probably going to the Wyoming section. The Wisconsin section had 104, but they probably still had snow on the ground. Double Tap was 131, the Great Plains 174, Northern Illinois 184, Northern Illinois. That makes me think Chicago, and I'm not going anywhere within a 700-mile radius of that city with a gun. So that is basically the first half of the year. Those numbers will stay on the screen as we go to the right side and start looking at them. Now, there's a lot more matches in the second half of the year. I mean, we're talking, I'm not even done with all of them yet. And I think if we go, yeah, so 41 matches compared to 26. Okay. So quite a few more matches. And you had 7 area matches held in the second half of the year. This is where I think it goes back to Carry Optics being in June, being that it's the biggest division, most popular division. I think that's a poor time to plan that nationals. I'm gonna, I'll hit it on it again later, but I really think there needs to be an irons and an optic, and maybe you do irons in June, and then all the optics in October, where you have the majority of the major participants, and we'll break that down because there is a huge disparity between the number of optics participants and the number of irons participants. So if I were in charge, if I were king for a day, that would be the first thing I did. We're doing irons and optics national championships. Irons will be in June, optics will be in October, and that's it. That's all there is. And no, there will be no limited 10 optics at nationals. The ridiculous numbers for limited 10 is, I would relegate limited 10. I would actually make it a policy. You don't need to make it a, in the rule book or anything, but I would make it a policy that limited 10 would be level 1 only. That's it. It's the only place that it would be. Well, I guess you could shoot it at a level 2, but definitely not at a level 3 or a level 4, meaning nationals or area matches. That's what I would do. I would basically ban it from those two. And here's why I say that. We're literally looking at like 50 people shooting that throughout the entire year. 50. So you're going to keep it a division at nationals, and whatever number of people that sign up to shoot that at nationals in a non-competing division is ridiculous. They can shoot, if they want to shoot nationals, they can shoot something else or not go. That's how I would do it. And then someone else who is shooting a competing division would have that spot. Basically, I look at it as a wasted spot. So now if you wanted to, I guess if you wanted to, and this is a bigger discussion, if you do split them, then maybe you let them because you're like, meh, who cares? But it's going to be irons only. There will be no dots. So it'll be a true limited 10, not the limited 10 optics stuff that's allowed. So that's a bigger discussion for another time, but the limited 10 just needs to, I don't even need to have a column for that is what I'm getting at. So this might be the last year you even see a column for limited 10. I may just personally delete it and not count it at all. I'll count it in the total numbers for the match, but I will not recognize it in numbers in my spreadsheet. It's just a waste of my time. So there you go. Okay. Second half of the year. Now the CO Nats are over, but now we have IPSC Nats and we have World Shoot still making an impact as to who's doing what. So, regardless, the numbers for carry optics for the second half of the year. And I need to preface this, there are still 4 matches to be shot. Okay. I've gone up to area 2. The Every match before area 2 is at a point where they're done and area 2 is full. So by including area 2, even though it's 3 or 4 weeks away, being that it's full, those numbers aren't going to change enough to really drastically alter anything in these numbers that we're looking at. As the time gets closer and the match happens, I'll go back in and double check all the numbers and make the corrections as needed, but it's not going to make a statistical difference at this point. So, lots of matches for the second half of the year. As we said, there's like 41, 40, 41, something like that. A lot of matches. Anyway, so let's get into it. So for the second half of the year thus far, CO is hanging right around 35%. That's a round up. Limited optics is right around 29. That's a small round down. Open hanging right around 16%. That's a small round up. Limited is at 4% again. That's a small round up. That's a smaller round up than the first half of the year. Production is at 3%. So that's a slight round up, whereas in the first half of the year, it was a round down. So percentage wise, there's actually been a little bit of a drop off the second half of the year in production. Single stack is at 2.1%. So it's 2, slight round down, but that's about a half a percentage point more than what was going on with them in the first half. Now, single stack is a world shoot division. So could that have spurred some people on to shoot single stack that were going there? Maybe they weren't shooting it in the first half of the year. I don't know. I would think not. I think the world shoot people were shooting single stack, period. I don't know what the difference is. Other than a couple of the matches are geographically in an area where single stack is more popular. So that's probably the bigger reason as to why we see a little bit of a bump in single stack. Again, we're still only talking 2%. So not a massive number. Revolver's at 0.88 for the second half of the year, with still, again, 4 matches to be added, but I don't see that number changing a whole lot. The first half of the year for Revolver was 0.49. So this is actually an improvement over the first half of the year, but there's one match every year that has a ridiculous number of Revolver shooters. It's nowhere near the most popular in that match. However, it's it's I mean, you want to call it the closest thing to I-Corps and USPSA for Revolver participation? We could, and that's the Free State. So I believe that's in Kansas when I looked it up last year, and actually reached out to the match director because I think last year was at 19, and I'm like, oh, when are these numbers going to be correct when they put people in the proper divisions? He's like, no, they are in the proper divisions. There will probably be more. I'm like, whoa, my bad. I stand corrected. The Free State every year has a crap ton of Revolver shooters, so that is always going to bump up those numbers at the end. I mean, remember, first half of the year we're talking 5 and 6 participants as being a lot, and now here you have a match that has 22. The only match in the entire year that has double-digit numbers for Revolver. Okay, limited 10. 36 total participants the first half of the year. So far, we have 28 participants for the second half of the year. So just ridiculous number. Ridiculously low number for a division. So, which is less than fewer participants than Revolver. So that's why my rant happened earlier with Limited 10. Um, so it was at 0.53% for the first half of the year. It's at 0.28% for the second half of the year. So it's where we're at. It's at nothing. It's a nothing biscuit. All right. So the numbers are dreadful in that regard. Now, total number of participants the first half of the year was 6,748. Total number of participants so far in the second half, again, I must reiterate, there are still 4 matches that I need to put numbers in for, and I need to adjust area 2. But right now, 10,048 competitors in the second half of the year. So much larger participation overall with numbers. So, and of course, the biggest match of the year is the Area 2 match outside of Nationals. That is, and actually, I think it might even exceed Nationals. I think it has a larger total number than does any of the Nationals matches. And I know Leighton had made a comment on, I think it was CO Nats. Maybe it was Ipsic Nats, one of the two, where he's like, we can fit 600 people into our area match. Why can't you fit 600 people into those other nationals, bigger matches? And maybe he has a point. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of that, so I will not pass judgment at all because I do not know. I could sit down and figure out, based on how many you want in a squad and blah, blah, blah. We could figure out the numbers that way. But I know there's always like disparities between squads. And then you never know when someone's not going to show up for a match, even in nationals. So it is what it is. So those are the numbers so far. Now, here are some other things that I want to talk about real quick. That's why I scrolled up here. So if you're if you're watching the video, you know what just happened. If you're just listening, then you'll have to have me describe it to you. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit higher so I can see a little better. There we go. Total numbers for the year thus far, minus those last 4 matches, which are, so I'll just name them: the Red Dirt Rumble Oklahoma section, the South Florida section, the North Florida section, and the Mid Mississippi Christmas Classic. Those are the 4 matches that still have to be shot. And I'm going to wait till I get probably about the time Area 2 is being shot. I'll go in, confirm the numbers for that match, and then I'll probably go in and start adding in those other matches and get a pretty close to a final number. But here's one of the things I wanted to point out. Optics, 90.15% of all participation. Irons, 9.85%. So we're going to call it 90-10. So 9 out of 10 participants at a level 2 match have an optic on their gun. Whatever division they're shooting a division with an optic on their gun. Only 1 out of every 10. So basically, look at it like this. Typically, squads are 10 to 12 people in size. One person on that squad has iron sights. Everybody else has an optic on their gun. At this point, if you want people who shoot irons, they want to go to a nationals. They want to be able to shoot that level of a match. But when you start crowding them into optics divisions, it makes it harder for them to shoot at a nationals. And it's also more difficult if you're shooting CO and you have production there. It makes it a little bit more tricky to make the entire match fair and equitable for both. You want to challenge the carry optic shooters with difficulty, but you can't make it so difficult that it's too difficult for the production guys. So you run into issues there, whether it's just target difficulty or reloading because they're different capacities, things like that. If you put all your optics in one nationals, they're all basically max capacity. So who cares? You don't, that's one less thing to worry about. And now knowing that everybody's running an optic, oh, now you can make the targets more technically difficult because you're challenging people with a dot. On the iron side, now you can make it more friendly to reloading and you can make the difficulty of the targets a little bit more apropos for those divisions. So I think that in the end, if you're not going to do one big national, then I think that's the way to do it. You do irons and optics being 90% of the people, let that be your year end nationals. That's the big one. That's the one where everybody's going to be throwing down to see who wins. Will they do that in irons? Yes, but it's not as competitive. It isn't. I mean, when you look at the numbers, there's no way that with 10% of the people shooting irons, that's as competitive as the other side where 90% of the people are shooting those optics devices. So I would propose that that's what they do. See what happens. But let's break down the numbers year by year. Okay. So right now, as the numbers shake out, CO, if the numbers ended today, if what I had in my Excel spreadsheet was the final number, then here's how the percentages would shake out. Carry optics would be at 36.38, so we're going to round down to 36. Limited optics being at 28.22, we're going to round down to 28. Open, we round up to 16 from 15.65. PCC is almost right at 10%. So we're going to round down 4/100ths of a percentage to 10 for PCC. Limited is at 3.7, so we'll call it 4. Production's at 302, so we'll call it 3. Single stack 188, we'll call it 2. Revolver 0.72, we'll call it 1. Limited 10.38, we call it worthless. Little ASMR for you there. So let's look at comparison of years. And we're going to start with CO. In 2022, so at the end of 2022, so just 3 years ago, CO was at 36.79. If the numbers in today, it's at 36.38. So really, statistically, it hasn't moved. It did in 2023, it dropped a little bit down to 34.88. So we call it 35. So it went from 37 to 35 to 39 last year to 36 so far this year. So it's hanging right around in that upper 30s, just wavering a little bit back and forth. Limited optics, we have nothing for 2022, nothing for 2023. 2024 was a partial year. It started May 1st. That was at 23%. Right now it's at 28%. So they may have taken a small number from CO, but they've taken from other divisions as well. So let's get into that because, man, once you get on the other side of the optics and into those irons divisions, whoo-wee, you fall off the cliff rapidly in some of these. Open. In 2022, as you can see right here, it was 22.56%. So we're going to call it 23. So for those of you listening, I'm just going to go whole numbers. In 2022, open was 23%. In 2023, it was 21%. And now I'm rounding, so technically it's only 1% drop, but it sounds like 2. In 2024, it dropped to 17%. Now that's a bigger drop. In 2022, now we're down to 16%, and that's a round up. So really there's in between years from 2022 to 2023, it was a 1.07 percentage point drop. From 2023 to 2024, it was a 4.68 percentage point drop. And then from last year to this year, it's another 1.15 percentage drop. So open is bleeding, not hemorrhaging, but it's bleeding. PCC went from a high of 12.79, so we're going to just call it 13 in 2022, to 11 in 2023, to 12 in 2024, to 10 in 2025. So it might have a small laceration going on there. Limited, however, all right, you might want to sit down for these, because this is your arterial bleed right here. You guys like to run around with all that medical stuff on your belt. Here you go. You might want to pull out a tourniquet for these limited guys. In 2022, limited was 15%. In 2023, it was at 12. In 2024, it was 6. 15 to 12 to 6 to 4. So almost 75% drop in participation in 3 years. In 3 years. That is significant. So let's look at production. In 2022, it was a 7.95% of participants. So we're going to call it 8. 2023, it was 6. 2024, it was 4. 2025, it is 3. So if we had 8 and we're at 3, that means it's only 3/8 of the number. So 3/8 is 37.5%, which means they've lost 62.5% of participants in that same time period. That's a lot. So limited production are bleeding out. Bleeding out. This is another reason why I think they need to be separated into their own nationals. If you want to breathe any life into them, that's how you do it. But because there are so few participants in it, don't put it in freaking October. Put it in June. I almost said January. There you go. Put it in January. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Put it in June. So for those three months leading up, people can shoot irons, say that they did it, participate at a nationals, and then boom, you'll see the numbers explode everywhere else for the rest of the year, and irons will be done. People will go back, put their iron sighted gun back in the safe, and pull out the real guns and go to the range, practice, shoot, compete against a vast number of other individuals to compete against, and we'll have some real competition. Look, that is tongue in cheek, but it's all there. There's also some fact behind that. I'm not trying to be a bunghole, but I'm just being direct. That's all I'm doing. So let's talk single stack. Now, single stack in 2022 wasn't a very big percentage to begin with. It was 3.38. Probably the division that started it all back in the 1970s, single stack. It was at 3.38 at the end of the year. So we're going to call it 3. They were 259 at the end of 2023. We'll call that also 3. But really, it's a 0.79 percentage point drop. And then in 2024, they're at 2.1. So we're calling it 2. And now they're at 188. We'll call it 2. So they have been losing people as well. I mean, look, right now, the total number of single stack participants through uh, 77 matches is 316 people. That's less than 3 in a match if you average it that way. That's nothing. Is there oh, no, I'm sorry, 4. It's like 4 in a match. Wow. I did not math that right, did I? So it's 4 in a match. I mean, look, production's not much better. It's like it's less than 7 in a match. In a match, a whole match. That they can't even fill up a squad with the number of production shooters. You can make a production super squad at these level 2 matches and never fill a squad. Now, there are some exceptions, obviously, but on average, you're not even filling a squad. Can limited do that? Nope, limited cannot either. Once you get beyond PCC, once you get into irons, period, there is not, with rare exception, if you're looking at the averages across the board, you cannot fill a single squad with any of these guys. You could probably fill a squad with uh limited and single stack or production single stack and revolver, but that's how you would have to do it. You'd have to put multiples on there, multiple iron sight divisions to fill a squad other than limited. Well, no, I mean limited and maybe a smaller one there too, because not quite. We'll call it 8, and then we need so limited and single stack would get you right around 12 participants. So that's how you could fill a squad with them. And then you'd have to put production revolver limited 10 in another squad and then probably sacrifice an optics guy to go in there to fill it up. Sorry, optics guy. That's the state of iron sights. It's pretty poor. It's really poor. But I mean, isn't that the nature of everything? So, things change, things evolve. So it is what it is. I really think at this point you've got to separate them. I would put them in June. Let the irons compete in June, and then you're going to have some optics guys who are like, "Oh, sure, I'll do it." Shoot, you might even get Garen Singleton to shoot revolver at a nationals or something like that. When 9 out of 10 people are shooting optics, then you've got to sit down and evaluate how you're doing things because yeah, you don't want to exclude the 10%, but you definitely can't run a business on the 10%. You've got to run a business on the 90%. That is what your business is. So, and right now, the business of USPSA is 90% optics. I don't care how you cut it, it's 90% optics. That's the future. And it'll be interesting as we go forward. We get to add another year next year to limited optics to see how it shakes out because it'll just be interesting to see how the numbers of these other optics divisions go. You're not going to get any growth in the irons divisions unless something really weird happens. And I am not Nostradamus, so I cannot predict anything. So, but I do want to go back because Area 2, I did not bring this up and I meant to. Area 2 is the biggest match, has the largest number of participants for the second half of the year in limited optics, open, PCC, limited, production, and single stack. So I want to throw in production at the Gridiron Arena also had 21. Oh, and I missed Area 8 also had season here that have had 21 competitors in production. So those are your biggest numbers right there. That actually boosted production. Without those 3 being so strong in production, that number would be smaller. But again, how many of those are duplicates? That's what I would be curious about. I don't have any way of checking to see how many people are duplicates in this or in that, but it would be interesting to see. Like anybody shooting Area 2, did they shoot Area 1? Little things like that. So it really, This is where the USPSA would know. I would not, but they would be able to parse that out by member numbers. So, but those are the numbers. There is one other thing that I want to add. One other thing I want to talk about. So I'm going to do some adjustment real quick. So, as you can see on the screen, area championship participation. This is another one that I've been tracking for years, as you can see, since 2014. In practice score, I can only find four area championship participation numbers, or three, I'm sorry. And that was area two, area three, and area four. So, coming through to today, 2025, this year by far, Area 2 is the largest match, and they have been really for the last 5 years. That's including 2025. They've been over 500 participants since 2021. And it was a big jump. Like if you look at 2020, it was 359. In 2021, it was 520. Even 2019, let me run my cursor over here. Even where'd you go, area two? Even 2019 was 440, 2018 478. So they have significantly increased their numbers. So good for them. That's a big match. A lot of people want to go there and shoot it, but they're doing something right. Whatever it is, they're doing it right. Now, historically, their average is 483.6 participants. I'd hate to be that point six guy, but for the last 4 or 5 years, they have been well over their historical average, which I'm sure is actually bringing their average up quite significantly. Historically, the smallest area match is Area 5 at 326. Right behind it is Area 3 at 327.9. Now, Area 5 this year had 422. So they were way over what their average is. And even from last year, they were 53 competitors. So good for them. Area 8 made a big jump over last year. They had 114 more participants this year than last year. And they were just under their historical average. Their historical average is 487.9. But since 2021, they have been under their average. So the numbers this decade have actually brought their historical average down. And the average number of participants, as you can see right here, is 458 for this year. Last year it was 446. So I I have it as a remaining steady just because we're only talking about a 2 to 3% difference. It's a small increase. It's good. I mean, anytime you can get a year that even if it's one more shooter that participated than last year, then that's excellent. But it's not like from 2023 where an average of 388 participants competed at each area match to 2024 where 446 competed at each match. That is a significant jump. That's a good jump. So, and you have to remember too now, there were 12 more than last year. But if you divide that up by the 8, then it's only 1.5 at each match. However, I will say, and that's average. I will say too that there was 541 additional shooters this year that competed. 337 of them were at Area 3 because Area 3 did not have an area match last year. So that's a bonus this year. The last time an area match had 0 participants was 2020, where Area 6 had 0. That would have been during the COVID year, the great debacle. Well, those are all the numbers that I have. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about them or want to know anything more. I don't know that I'll do another episode quite like this for the rest of the year. Who knows? Maybe I will. Maybe I'll get some other statistic guys on here and we'll just talk about these numbers and about what they mean and what you can do to adjust them, and meaning not adjust them, but adjust how the USPSA does matches in regards to the numbers. Because I think these numbers should be driving what the USPSA does. There needs to be a lot of analysis of this and determine, because some of these numbers are just purely geographical. When I was looking at like limited optics, it seemed like they're all of the ones where there were a lot of where limited optics outperformed carry optics was all across the South. I'll probably do a map on this and then just make an Instagram post out of it. But it, to me, in my head, as I was just looking at the numbers and visualizing what it would be in a map, it almost reminded me of like the Civil War, where the upper half of the United States is CO, the bottom half of the United States is LO, and I'm not doing blue and gray though. So we'll do pink for like the bottom half and what, just kidding. But I'll have to do a map on that. It's pretty interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out. Appreciate everybody listening. Hopefully you got something out of this.